making sculptures for 20, 30 years, and once when I was in graduate school, I was painting houses in the summer to add to family income because I was a high school art teacher, and so during the summer we would paint houses. And I was also in graduate school in a sculpture class. And so I was standing on that ladder thinking about what I was going to make for the sculpture class, and I thought of putting a ladder in a sculpture. I have no idea where that came from. It's like that's how ideas happen, And so I did that, and I kind of liked that. I had some memories of Jacob's ladder that I had learned about in Sunday school, and I could see, like there was potential meanings associated with ladders that I was interested in, and so they kept me kind of reoccurring periodically as I was, making my way as an artist. The idea of borrowing ladders from a community was to try to expand the idea about art out of the museum and the gallery setting, which I was used to working in, where people would come who wanted to come and see art. They would experience it in that context. If I would make something out of ladders that I borrow from all over a community and ask them to lend them to me to make an image of the community, they might be willing to do that if I gave them a period of time and said I would use it and then give it back. And if I could get them to do that, they would have to then understand the concept of the sculpture before I made it. I thought that was an interesting approach, and that allows me to go to anybody and everybody in the community, not necessarily who went to see art that day. They're just eating dinner, and I'm knocking on their door, and I'm saying I'm an artist working at this museum, and this is the project, and we're borrowing ladders. They maybe say, gee, I don't know, do I have any ladders that I don't need the next month? I would say, and any size will do. We don't, discriminate. You can even make one and be creative. We'll take any ladder. We just want to include as many people as we can. And they start to see like they might want to be involved in this because they also have this ideal idea about what a community can be. So they'd like to participate. And so we work something out, and hopefully I'll walk away with a ladder under my arm, and they have a form that says they lent the ladder, and we'll bring it back at this time and date. So to me, that's just a different way of making art than working in a studio, which I also do, and I do work that goes into galleries, but this is like a little bit different. I had done a project, it was just last year, in Roanoke, Virginia, at the Taubman Museum of Art. And Ann Brennan, who's the director here at the Cameron Art Museum, was looking for projects that a museum might do that would engage a broader audience within the community. She saw what we had done in Roanoke, and that looked interesting to her, so she contacted me. I realized, when I came down here that Wilmington's like a lot of communities. There's various institutions within it, and this is an art museum. And I think an art museum always is interested in new audience. In a way, it's just like a church. A church is always looking to embrace more, and a museum is looking for that too. As I'm sort of beginning to learn to know the community, as people are calling into the museum saying, we heard about the project and we would like to lend a ladder, I would have an address, and that would take me to one part of the city, and on the way there I would see other things like Cape Fear Literacy Council. I saw that sign along the road, and I thought, I need to stop in there. They made up a ladder to lend. The main emphasis of the project is to engage as much of the community as possible. And so one way to do that is with schools. Talking to the children is a method, that works for acquiring ladders, but the project is also about the idea. It's not only about getting a bunch of ladders and making something interesting. And so the idea spreads in the community too. Another thing we talk about is how they are sort of like on a ladder, and at one time they couldn't read. but now they've reached and higher, like a ladder does, and they have them, put their hands up like they look like a ladder, and they're reaching to get higher, and now they can read. So, they start to see like that, what ladders might be all about without me using the word metaphor. We just talk about ladders and what they do, and they understand that. So if we take ladders that we've borrowed from people, each one is like their hopes and dreams. And if we lean them on each other and tie them together, and they all are holding each other, helping each other rise up together, then we have something that we call a community. That's what we're going to try to represent with this sculpture. But I'd say, but we need lots of ladders to do this. So if you have ladders at home, talk to your parents. And maybe they'll have a ladder that they can spare and lend to the sculpture. And then the teacher takes flyers and sends flyers home. They send emails to their contact list at the school. And so it spreads out into the community. We all have this sort of ideal in our heads of what a community is supposed to be. And I like to think that it kind of starts in a neighborhood sort of thing where you borrow and lend things, you share things with each other, you get to know each other and trust each other in that small neighborhood, and maybe even understand and have empathy for each other. And as we expand out into the greater world, getting further and further away, including more and more of the world in our community, I think that ideal gets kind of stretched, and we start to sort of lose a vision of it, that it's possible. But I think that that's what this is all about. This is all about trying to demonstrate that it's still there, that that ideal is still strong. We can look for it. All we have to do is open our eyes and our hearts and our spirits, and there's a community that's alive, and that ideal is still there. The concept of what form Rise Up Wilmington would take on the lawn in front of the Cameron Museum was really born from looking at that space and then talking about how much of it we would use. And so it was suggested that the whole lawn was available. I noticed that there's several tall pine trees out there, and so I thought that anything that didn't try to compete with them a little bit would look small. So I thought of the idea of having some towers that would rise up. The museum also has an identity. Part of its identity is in the architecture on the roof, the skylights that are in the form of pyramids. And so towers held up by pyramid kinds of structures would kind of tie in visually with that. And then the idea that people will be driving by, so stretching it out across the lawn gives them time to see it. The three towers were kind of like spaces that in that view that you see from the road, where there were gaps between the trees with the museum behind it. Some of the other thoughts that have occurred to me as I was developing that idea is they're kind of like waves, and it comes down and rises up again. And Wilmington is associated with the beach, so that's a real literal interpretation of that. But when you think of communities, there's the spirit of communities follows a wave pattern. We feel like we're on the rise at a time where we're coming down, and we're looking for the next kind of up experience. Other people have made other visual references. Wilmington is very proud of its churches, and downtown there's all kinds of steeples, and there's been histories written about the various steeples of the churches. And so these towers are kind of like that, and that's not a bad image either. That sort of like reaching, connecting heaven and earth kind of idea. It's really just a matter of trying to engage as much of the community as possible, get them to see themselves as part of the whole, and all of those parts being an important part, and all of them leaning on, supporting each other to make this thing that we call community that we know doesn't work without that kind of spirit that people, have. And so this, to me, is art about trying to just remind us of that.